Hi everyone, and welcome to this latest episode of the 10x Leadership channel. I think we're on episode 6 already, and in the last episode I talked about 9 different leadership styles and the absolute best leadership style that we should be using. And all that's well and good, but how do you actually determine which leadership style to use in which situations? So that's what we're going to cover today in this video. Hi, welcome back. Got some slides, just 3 slides to go through this week about how you determine which leadership style to use in which situation. Hence the title of this video, which is Cracking the Code, the right leadership style for every situation. And like every, I suppose like everything in life, there are different levels of complexity and expertise. So the model I'm going to take you through is a really good model. I've used it lots myself. I used it especially when I was new to leadership and trying to work out what's the best leadership style to apply in various situations. The exact reason that you're here. I suppose like anything, the more that you do it, and the more you analyse what you're doing, and the more you try and improve, the more it becomes second nature. So, take this model for what it is, which is a really good tool to help you begin to determine which leadership style to use. It doesn't cover every leadership style, it doesn't cover every situation, but what it does give you is a really good foundation and a good way of getting started. And then as your emotional intelligence and your leadership skills improve, you'll just get better and better at it, and you won't even need the model, you'll just be doing it as a matter of course. So let's get into it. So this is a really simple 2-step process, and the 2 steps are, first of all, you need to assess the individual or team, and what you're doing is you're assessing them for A, their competence, and B, their commitment. So, how good are they at the thing that you want them to do? What experience have they had at doing that? How many times have they done it? Is this a completely new situation to them? And then also, how committed are they to doing it? So sometimes, I talk about that as skill and will. So how skillful are they, and how much will do they have to do the thing that they're supposed to be doing? So, the competence we've talked about, the commitment, how motivated are they without you having to push them? Will they just go off and do it on their own? Do they need some help? Do they, how much do you need to be there to make sure the thing happens? And as I've said all the way through these videos, you really need to understand yourself. You really need to understand your people. And again, here's a great example. How are you going to be able to assess the individual or the team if you don't know them? If you don't know what makes them tick, it's going to be harder, isn't it? So the more you know your people in your team, the easier this is going to be. And of course, you might be taking over a new team, and this might be the very first time you've worked with them, in which case there's a really simple answer. Have a conversation with them. Go and talk to them. Find out what they're capable of. Find out how committed they are. So none of this has to be rocket science. Just go and have a conversation. So the second step of this process is that you use the assessment that you've made of their competence and commitment to determine which leadership style you need to use. And in the model I'm going to show you on the next page, basically it's based on 2 parameters. How much direction is required from you to enable the thing to happen? And then secondly, how much support is going to be required by you, again, to make the thing happen. So you don't need to, try and match up the criteria we've got here to a whole range of leadership styles. There are 4 basic leadership styles that can be covered, and you just use either direction or support to determine which of those it is. So let's have a look at the model, and you can see how easy it is. So I'm going to talk you through 4 examples of how the model works and how you determine which leadership style you would use. So let's imagine that person A has a low level of competence and a high level of commitment. So this might be somebody who is new into your company or organisation. They are really keen, but you don't think they have the competence to do the thing that you want them to do. And that might be because it's never been done before. They might be new to the organisation. Or you might just not know at this point how competent they are. So, low competence, high confidence. Sorry, high commitment, low competence. And all you need to do is use this model, which is a model created by Hershey and Blanchard, which looks at those 2 things that I talked about in the previous slide. So how much direction do you need to give from low to high, and how supportive do you need to be from low to high? So in this particular instance, with somebody or a team that has low competence but high commitment, what you're going to need to do is be highly directive. You need to be highly directive, but you're going to not provide massive amounts of support. Now, let me just sort of clarify that, because it can be quite confusing. So it's not that you're not supportive of the individual and the team. It's about the amount of effort you're going to be putting in. In some of the other scenarios, as you'll see, you're going to have to spend a lot of time with people to get to the right answer. With a directive, highly directive approach, basically you're just going to be telling them what they need to do, and that doesn't take a lot of time. So that's why in this instance the supportive is classed as low. So you've got that, and you might be thinking, okay, so what? Well, what leadership style then do I need? Well, the answer is, according to the Hershey and Blanchard model, and I have, as I say, used this an awful lot in my career, you just need to use a directive leadership style. So I've connected it back to the leadership styles in episode 5, and as you can see there from that little icon, in terms of the previous video, that would be an autocratic leadership style. So as we were talking about in the last video, you might think autocratic is a poor choice of leadership style, but everything has a time and a place. And in this particular instance, where you have somebody with low competence but high commitment, they're keen to get on with it, but they don't know what they're doing. So the best way of dealing with that is for you to be directive, tell them what needs to be done, have close supervision, be really clear about what you're expecting, and I suppose guide them through that and make sure that they're doing what you expected them to do. So this is more about telling people than you'll use in other leadership styles. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. That's the first scenario. The second scenario is where you have somebody with some competence, but actually their commitment is quite low. So you've got somebody here who knows what they're doing, and you can trust to deliver, but actually their commitment isn't where it needs to be, and that's the bit you're worried about. So in scenario 2, what you need to be is highly directive, but also highly supportive. So you're going to be spending more time with them to try and get them to the right place. And the leadership style here is the coaching leadership style. So I mentioned in my previous video that the coaching leadership style does take more time, but actually what is really good about it is that it helps the person understand why you would do something in that situation. So that helps them repeat that process and repeat that thinking for the next time that they do it. So coaching leadership style is the right approach in this particular scenario. And what I just want to point out is, even though I'm talking about different people in this instance, or in these instances, it doesn't have to be different people at all. It could be the same person who is really quite competent in one area, as in this top right hand example, but actually isn't really competent and doesn't have the right competence in another scenario. So it doesn't have to be different people. It could just be different people, the same person in exactly the same day doing two slightly different things. So, why am I pointing that out? Well, I suppose because I don't want you thinking that you have to apply exactly the same leadership style to the same person all of the time, based on how long they've been in the organisation or the company. This is about assessing the situation that the individual or the team is in, and determining for that particular activity what's the right leadership style that you need to demonstrate and that you need to employ to get the best out of the team or the individual. Hopefully that's clear. So the third scenario, and again could be the same person on a different task. It could be a completely different person, doesn't matter. In this particular scenario then, you've got somebody who has a moderate level of competence, and it might even be that they have a high level of competence, but actually their commitment is variable. So what do you do in that scenario? How do you overcome that problem? And again, I suppose just to emphasise the point, this could be you coming into a new team. You don't know the people, but from observing them, from observing your team, you might come across some people that do have either a moderate or a high level of competence, but they don't seem to be particularly committed. Now, there might be a whole range of reasons for that. There's a whole load of different reasons that we are motivated, and I'm going to cover that in one of the other videos. And you might be able to tackle the problem another way. But to begin with, you could apply the leadership style that is associated with this particular scenario. So as you can see from the X and Y axis, the directive behaviour and the supportive behaviour, in this particular instance, you'd be looking to be low in terms of direction, but high in terms of support. So, completely different to the other three. And this one is much more of a supportive leadership style. So let me just have a quick look at my notes here. So for scenario 3, this is more about the leader encouraging followers to participate in decision making, and the leader supporting their efforts. So we also talked about servant leadership in the previous video, in episode 5. So this doesn't have to be tied to just one leadership style. It can sort of branch out into a range of different leadership styles. But the point here is that it's less about being directive, it's more about encouraging that individual, because they have the competence to be involved in decision making and moving the situation forward. It doesn't mean that you're abdicating responsibility either. I think I talked about that in episode 5. It's about you still having responsibility, but I suppose delegating some of that responsibility to the individual in terms of getting them involved in the decision making, supporting them through the process, and I suppose spending quite a bit of time with them again to make sure that that their commitment and motivation is increased, to enable them to do what we know that they can do, which is deliver the activity. I'm just having a look here at an example. So a team that has a high level of expertise in a particular area may benefit from a participating or supportive style where the leader seeks their input on how to approach a project or providing support as needed. And let's say it is about helping that person or team become more motivated because they've already got the competence to deliver it. And the final scenario or person is one who is both is high in both competence and commitment. And in an ideal world, that's where all of your team would be. And if you've got a team of people who are all really committed and all really competent, you're onto a winner before you even start. And this, in this scenario, as you can see from where this box appears on the chart, you need a low level of direction, so low directive, but also low supportive. And this really is where you can delegate. So the one above was more about support, and you do have to provide that high level of support. The next step on from that is where you can delegate the activity to either a team or individuals. So that's basically delegating both the decision making on how to tackle the problem and how to solve the problem, as well as giving responsibility, I suppose, to the team or individual to deliver that with minimal supervision. Again, I just want to emphasise, I've seen in my career lots of people, I've had lots of conversations actually with, I suppose, poor leaders where they said, well, I don't know what's going on with that activity, nothing to do with me, I've given it to them. That isn't delegation, that is abdication. You are still accountable for it, you might be responsible for it as well. And what you want is your team to deliver it with minimal supervision. And again, the benefit of that is that it gives you time to concentrate on the things that only you can deal with. And it allows your team to get on with the things that they can deal with. And it also gives them ownership of the task. And an ownership of a task is one of the great ways of motivating people. So you don't need to keep pushing them to get the job done. They want to do it anyway. They're really, really keen to get it done because they own it and they're bought into it. So if you can get people into the delegating space in your team, that's absolutely brilliant. So I'm just going to finish off this delegating leadership style, and then I'm just going to make a couple of points just to finish off. So, how does the leader know? Well, as I say, you've assessed the competence and commitment, and the leader, or you as the leader, will know that you can trust the team or individual because they're really capable, they have the competence, and also they have the right motivation to take the lead and make sure the thing is delivered. So the example I've got here is a highly experienced and motivated team that successfully completed similar projects in the past, and they may benefit from a delegating style. So it's where you as the leader completely entrust them with a full responsibility for project execution without abdicating responsibility for it. So those are the four main leadership styles that will help you go from not understanding what leadership style to use to looking at the situation and applying the right leadership style. Now, of course, in any of these given scenarios, you can apply a leadership style, but what you need to do again is monitor to see whether that's working. If it's not working and you know, you might think, for example, that let's use scenario 4 there. It might be that you have a task that your team has delivered before. You think, well, great, I've done this, they are highly competent and highly committed. We'll have a conversation, make sure they're happy with it, let them get on with it. What happens in a day or two or a week or two when it starts to go off the rails for some reason and they start to lose commitment, or they realise the scenario wasn't the one that they thought it was, and you realise that the scenario wasn't the one you thought it was, and therefore the delegative style is no longer the right leadership style to be using. So you've got to keep monitoring, you've got to keep watching, you've got to keep engaging. And I suppose depending on which style you're using and how supportive you are in the style that you've chosen, will determine how your team alerts you to problems that they're having. So you should always have an open leadership style that will encourage people to come and talk to you anyway, especially where there are problems. But you know, you might have some people who you've delegated some activities to, who feel empowered, feel motivated, and then realise that the job's bigger than they thought, the task isn't what they thought it was, and they're starting to struggle. And they don't want to lose face, and they don't want to appear like they don't know what they're doing. So they might just muddle through, and of course that's the last thing you want them to do, because you're there as a leader to help them to achieve the outcome. So you definitely need to create an environment where people feel safe to come and talk to you, and especially come and talk to you about problems that they're having. And again, we'll cover how you do that in one of the other videos. So keep monitoring. This isn't select a leadership style and it's fixed and I don't ever need to consider it again. This is, I've selected a leadership style, is it working, is it not? And you'll get that through normal conversations that you're having with your team. But as I say, make sure that you're encouraging your team to talk to you, especially when things aren't working. So that's the code. That is the Hershey and Blanchard model. I say I've used that model for, well, all of my leadership career actually. I find it really useful. It's not perfect. I said at the start, it doesn't cover absolutely every leadership style, but it gives you the 4 main building blocks. And with practice, just like anything else, it will become second nature to you, and your teams will thank you for applying the right leadership style to the right situation. Hopefully you liked it. Hopefully it was useful. If you did, please tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell anyone that wants to improve their leadership ability, wants to go from good to great, and like, subscribe, and share the channel with others. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much.